Okay, good morning once again. We are still on our lessons here on YouTube. Still, we are considering the broader topic, human resource management. Today, we are going to look at another important subtopic. We'll be looking at industrial relations. The last time we met, we talked about human relations, and we looked at the difference between human relations and then industrial relations. Today we are going to look at that topic. When we were talking about human relations, we look at the meaning. Then we also talked about the fact that the relationship that exists between management and then the workers and then customers and so on and so forth could be described as either cordial or poor relationship. And we learned that as an organization, you need to establish good human relations that can help in the success of the business. In that same video, we talked about what industrial relation is all about. So you should be able to distinguish between the two terms. The two terms are not synonyms. They are not. You cannot use one to replace the other. One is human relation, the other is industrial relations. When we talk about industrial relations, what are we talking about? Now, in the workplace, remember we have the employer and we have the employees. Each one of them has their own interests. So the employer has its own interest, then the employee also has its own interest. For what reason are you giving your services to the organization? That is your interest. Why was the organization established? That is the organization's interest. But the two parties must work together. So here, in industrial relations, we are not looking at the relationship between a manager and then the employee, or managers and employees. Remember, we have learned that these employees or workers have their associations, which we call trade unions. Trade unions, which we have already talked about. We have made mention of trade unions. We'll look at that one in details. Now, the interest of these employees is represented by their association called the trade union. So anytime there is any disagreement, which we have already talked about, we have talked about the labor disputes and then their settlement procedure. We have talked about that one. So when we are talking about industrial relations, we are looking at the relationship that exists between the employer and then the trade unions. So if it is about teachers, the teachers have their union, or what we also call the trade unions, labor unions. The teachers have the unions that represent them. So NAGRAT will be representing the interest of its members, NAT will be representing the interest of its members, and so on and so forth. So that when there is any industrial disputes, the two parties, that is the employer and then the trade unions, will come together for the settlement of the dispute. So if you are looking at industrial relations, then you are looking at a formal, and when you say something is formal, that is official relationship that exists between the employer and then the trade unions. So here the stress is on the trade. You are looking at the employers and then trade unions. Unlike human relations, where we are looking at the relationship between management and workers. So here the unions do not come in, except that the employer is not treating the employees well, and then the employees themselves cannot handle it. Then their unions can then come in. So that formal relationship between the company's employers and then the trade unions is what we call industrial relations. So that is that. Just as we learned when we were talking about human relations, the industrial relation can also be described in two ways. Either it is cordial or it is poor. So you can have cordial industrial relations and you can have poor industrial relations. Now let's ask you this question. Have you heard of this term before? Tripartite committee. Tripartite committee. Now, when you talk about tri, you have the concept of triangle. So you know there's a partite. So we are looking at parties. So 3 parties. Now, what are the 3 parties when you hear of tripartite committee? That is where industrial relation comes in. We are looking at the employer. We are looking at the employees association, that is the trade unions. And then we are looking at the government. The government too is an employer, and we all know that the largest employer you can have. But we have private, so the private employers could be separated from that of government. So these 3 parties come together, especially when it comes to matters concerning wages. So every year when you hear that minimum wage has been increased by a certain percentage, such decisions are not taken unilaterally. It is the government, the employers association. The employers also have their association that will represent the interests of employers. Then all the trade unions or labor unions, they also have one association called the Trade Union Congress. So in such situations, when it comes to matters that have got to do with that of wage or salaries, then the 3 parties, the Trade Union Congress, will represent the interests of the employees. Then the Employers Association will represent the interests of the employers, and then the government will also be there. Then the 3 parties, as the tripartite committee, will now establish the minimum wage. So, and there are other things they can also talk about. So every year, when you hear of Workers' Day, May Day, you see these associations, you see the Trade Union Congress giving speeches and so on and so forth. So that is what this industrial relation is all about, the meaning of industrial relation. Then we have also talked about the fact that it could be cordial or it could be poor, and you need to establish cordial or good industrial relations in the organization. When that happens, then the environment will be free from friction, rancor, disputes, and so on and so forth. Workers will not be embarking on strike, or there wouldn't be strike actions. Currently, a particular institution is on strike. Go and find out. Now, the government wants to increase, or the government wants to charge VAT on utilities. Go and find out what the trade unions and then other members of the trade unions are saying. So they look at the interest of the worker. Now, we are going to look at another thing. We are going to distinguish between these trade unions. Before we go into trade unions in details, what they are and then their functions, there is another term that you also probably you might have come across. That is what we call trade associations. So trade associations or business associations. Business associations are not the same as trade union or trade associations. Especially when you use the term trade association, you might think it's the same as trade unions. The two are not the same. So trade associations, or what we also call business associations, are not the same as trade unions. So let's look at what the trade associations are before we move to the trade unions in details. Now, when you talk about trade associations, have you heard about Abosi-Okan or Abosi-Okan Spare Part Dealers Association? Have you heard of that before? Have you heard of Tema Garment Dealers Association? These are not trade unions. These are particular professions or organizations. So there are particular professions or manufacturers or tradesmen who can come together for the common interest or for the mutual interest of their members. Such are those we call trade associations. You see, when you are looking at the trade, that of industrial relations, we said they are formal relationships. These trade associations, they are voluntary associations. So you may not be under compulsion to join. For example, if you are a garment leader, you may choose not to join the Tema Garment Dealers Association, or somebody may choose not to join the Abosi-Okan Spare Parts Dealers Association. So such ones are distinguished from the trade unions. So that is the clear difference between the two, the trade unions and then the trade associations. So you should take note, when you see trade associations, they are not the same as the trade unions. And I've given you typical examples. There are several of them. Some of them are so local to the extent that, for example, you go to certain places, traders who are engaged in the sales of cassava can have their association, plantain can have the association. And for example, when you have such associations, you hear something like Banche Hema, meaning the queen mother of the cassava sellers. You can hear Brose Hema or Brodier Hema. That means the person is the queen mother. They have formed, those who sell cassava, those who sell plantain, they have formed that association, and the person is the leader. So in the marketplace, they refer to the person as queen mother. If the person is male, especially, for example, if you go to the Abosi-Okan Spare Parts Dealers Association, then they may call the leader a chairman. So others refer to him as chairman. So that is that. So I said, when you are looking at the trade associations, they are associations of tradesmen. So tradesmen or manufacturers in a particular trade. Tradesmen or manufacturers in a particular trade. In a particular trade. In a particular trade. For the protection and advancement of their common interest. For the protection and advancement of their common interest. So what is that protection? It could be in respect of fixing of prices. It could be the fact that maybe the government wants to increase taxes in respect of their particular trade. So, for example, the Abosioka spare parts dealers, if the government wants to increase the tariffs or taxes in respect of spare parts that they import, they can come together and then they agitate for either removal or reduction in respect of such taxes or tariffs. So they are there for the protection of their members and then the advancement of their common interests. So if you look at this place, I said they are voluntary associations organized by persons who are engaged in the same line of business. So they are engaged in the same line of business. So they are all engaged in the sales of spare parts. They are all engaged in the sales of cassava. They are all engaged in the sales of plantain. So they are engaged in the same line of business. And the purpose for which they establish such association is to protect its members. So I have indicated, for example, here that they exercise control over prices. If you want to, for example, if you increase the taxes in respect of their particular product, they will also come together to increase the prices of their product. And usually, if the demand for their product is inelastic, for example, if you have a car and your car is spoiled, if you have to buy spare parts, you buy. So it doesn't matter the price. So they will come together to increase the prices of spare parts, so that it wouldn't be like somebody has increased, another one hadn't increased. So that is what the trade associations, they are all about. They can exercise control by prices. They can have standardized price, so that when you go to this place and they tell you are buying a particular part and you are told that it is 50 cedis, it is 100 cedis, it is 1,000 Ghana cedis, it is 12,000 Ghana cedis, wherever you go, that would be the same. So that is what they are. And I've already told you the names we give to their leaders, and I've given you examples of trade associations. So that is for that. I'll end this one here. We are still looking at industrial relations. We have looked at the meaning of industrial relations. Then we also looked at the tripartite committee. I mentioned them. We'll be looking at them into details. We look at the employers association, their functions. We look at trade unions, their functions. Then we also come to look at the mother of the trade union. That will be the trade union congress, and then other aspects of industrial relation. But we meet again another time to continue on this same topic, industrial relation. All that you need to do is to go back into your notes, your book, study whatever is there. Till we meet again another time to continue with our lessons on industrial relation. Good morning.